Richard Bennett, fellow at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, veteran network expert and engineer. Welcome to Keen on Media.
Hi, Andrew.
So Richard, you've just done a panel, one of those interminable panels on network neutrality. In no more than a minute, where are we?
I think after probably 5 years of intense policy discussion, we finally reached the point where there is a consensus around the fact that reasonable network management is indispensable in every aspect of the internet that we use today, and we need to reach a consensus on the question of providing high-value, prioritized service for applications that run on the internet and need that.
So for ordinary viewers who don't understand the doublespeak of Washington, D.C., what does that mean?
It means that we have a faction which is kind of best represented by Google, but by no means are they the only representative of that, who believes that network operators who do business as internet service providers need to be constrained by a regulation that says that they can't levy any charges against anyone except their retail customer that pertain to how information is delivered across their networks.
And on the other side?
And on the other side, there are people who represent application providers who compete with Google, and also obviously the network operators themselves, who believe that innovation is actually improved if we have an environment in which applications, sort of non-web-ish, non-content oriented applications, like video conferencing and online gaming, that require a particularly high level of quality of service, should be able to pay money to a network operator to get that service.
So it's an economic fight, basically.
It is, absolutely.
And why is it going on so long? Why can't it get resolved? I mean, economic fights are all very well. They happen every day in the market. Why can't this thing get settled once and for all?
Well, this battle is actually sort of what's underneath it all is the notion that the federal government in the United States and other countries should be regulating the internet. And the internet, in 35 years that it's been in operation, is probably the least regulated communications network in the entire history of the world. And in some sense, this is when we're so used, especially in Washington, we're so used to everything being regulated, often by multiple agencies. The idea that something of this importance, that the internet is currently used by 1.6 billion people worldwide, that would be essentially exempt from regulation, is a frightening notion.
So what you're saying is it's the Google camp that wants to regulate?
Well, there are a lot of other people who want to regulate too, and I think if we sort of put the question in terms of should there be any regulations at all on the internet versus should there be none, everybody would say sure, there needs to be some level of regulation, there needs to be some level of certainty about the way the network's going to operate in the future.
Now, I understand that this is really a very important economic battle about who owns the next generation internet, but it has to be resolved. What needs to happen for the network neutrality issue to be put to bed?
Well, part of it is that we need to start to frame the issues in more crisp terms. As long as we're talking about vague general notions like openness, we're essentially never going to be done, because it's like trying to argue the value of liberty, justice, apple pie, and the American way. Because everybody defines those things differently, the debate goes on forever when you try to take those vague, general abstract notions and translate them into specific regulations.
So what do we do with a word like openness, which has of course been fetishized by many of the pro-internet people?
Well, I think we have to stop talking about the issue in those terms, and I think that what we need to do is the particular issue around which we have the most disagreement right now is price differentiation. So we should start talking in sort of dry, boring, traditional regulatory constructs like price regulation, service regulation, differentiation.
And in very simple terms, what are the core issues on price regulation? What needs to be resolved, and where can companies like Google and Verizon actually reach a compromise?
Well, there's a foundation issue behind it, which is that the price regulation discussion reflects ideas about network engineering. And this is kind of why I got into this debate after 30 years of designing network technologies like Ethernet over twisted pair, Wi-Fi, why I decided to get into a policy discussion, because the assumption that is on one side of the debate, essentially by the people who oppose price differentiation, is that the absolutely best way to build a network is in such a way that every packet of information that moves through the network is treated just like every other packet of information. And that from a network engineering standpoint, there's a belief that that is a correct way to build a network. And so the price regulation issue then becomes a way of enforcing that particular network engineering principle. And so, well, we need to focus on the price differentiation issue because it's something that regulators can understand in traditional terms of law and economics. So it's actually underneath that is a network engineering issue, which I think is never going to be well understood by the public.
Are you optimistic that this problem can be resolved, say, in the next 3 years by the end of this Obama administration?
I think it can be. It's certainly the results that we've seen in other parts of the world indicate that it's a problem that can be resolved by regulators. Certainly Europe has been under a lot of pressure to enact a network neutrality regime to prohibit price differentiation for different levels of service. And they have resisted, the European regulators resisted the temptation to enact anti-discrimination rules such as those that the folks are trying to enact in the U.S. and decided that for the time being what they need to do is have a transparency rule and simply scrutinize the practices to just see what's actually going on, look for some evidence of harm.
Isn't it critical for the internet economy and for innovation in general that this issue gets resolved and we can move on?
Well, we're never going to totally have it resolved because the internet's a dynamic system. There's always new technologies that are coming out and joining the internet. The mobile internet, I think, is going to be hugely transformative. And so as long as we have this sort of technical change going on at that level of the network, the regulatory issues are never going to completely be resolved.
Final question, Richard. Close your eyes. If you own the internet and you could fix this thing tomorrow, what would you do?
I'd just let it keep on going the way it's been going.
Richard, thank you so much.